Welcome to is that me? Welcome to the Beyond Jiu-Jitsu podcast, episode 151. My name is Adam Child, joined with my main man, Kieren Lefebvre, who usually does the introductions. However, obviously, for regular listeners, you know we are recording Australia to Sweden, so maybe there was a little delay, but I was looking at the camera and Kieran's face said to me, bro, I'm leaving you the space to do the intro. And then as I opened my mouth, I saw Kieren open his mouth. But we're here. Kieren, what's up?
World's worst intros.
I was waiting for you to say, bro, we're not recording yet.
Yeah. No, normally I'll leave a space and then come in and then I clip the first part of the episode. I just remove it in post.
I know, but I thought the space was well long. I thought you were like, bro, what do you do? Anyway.
So today's episode, we are talking about a little bit of banter. There's going to be some shit talk, but we're also, the theme, if you will, is competitions. I recently competed. If you listened to the last episode, you would have heard perhaps at the beginning that I mentioned I'm doing a little comp, a local comp, and it happened. I went, I made weight, and we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, so Kieren, it was your first comp, I believe, since leaving Australia, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Kieren is, the whole time he's trained with me, competed pretty consistently, but moved to Sweden. How long ago? When did you move? I can't even remember which month it was.
It was May, I think.
Was it May? Yeah, so, let's just round it out to a few months ago, moved, but then obviously anyone who's moved houses knows it sucks. Moving cities sucks. Moving countries is even harder. Yeah. So, and then you move countries and then have already moved house while being in the country and finding new gyms and being in a rural area. Obviously, a lot of things make it quite difficult to train, let alone compete. But finally got to go out and compete and tell the people how you did.
Yeah, it was good. It was a round robin format, submission only, no gi only, and it was EBI overtime rules. So if there was no points at all. If there was no submission in regular time, there was a 2 minutes of overtime, back or armbar.
Yes, so you can either start on the back or in the armbar.
Yes, but there was very different rules for that, and we can talk about that.
That's what I just wanted to dial back, because there's obviously a few different divisions you can go into in terms of experience. I remember you chose to go in your belt division. You're currently still a blue belt, so you went in the division that didn't allow heel hooks.
Yes.
However, because when people think EBI, they're probably just used to watching the professionals compete, which is like the if you will, elite rule set. So what was it for you? So could you do? I know you could do straight foot locks, but could you do any other leg locks? Could you do leg entanglements with reaps?
Yes.
And what were the rules? And what was the regular time limit?
So the regular time limit was only 5 minutes. The rules were very unique. I'd never seen a rule set like this, but it's similar to grappling industries in a lot of ways. What grappling industries used to be before they changed it, so it's not experience level, it's now belt level. I don't know if you're aware of that. But you could knee reap. There was knee reaps allowed at intermediate. There was knee bars allowed, straight knee bars only. No, I don't know why they differentiated that, but straight knee bars, no heel hooks, no toe holds. So you could do no lateral knee bar.
Yeah. So why they would differentiate that though? Because a lateral knee bar, you could, it's slightly, to some degree, you could make it, if you were on a debate team, you could make a case for a lateral knee bar being the same thing as a heel hook to some degree.
Yes. You definitely could. Because it's the same breaking mechanic.
Yeah, a lot of heel hooks, you dig the heel and essentially just tension the leg and then do a lateral knee bar. Look at the what's Mikey call his, the Mikey lock or whatever he calls, which is he's not digging the heel in the way we're used to in terms of a heel hook, but he's just locking that down. It's quite funny you mentioned that, because I rolled with at training tonight. Did you met Casper before you left, the big Polish dude? So I was wrong with Casper. Casper is the biggest, most gentle giant, but also a weapon. He's a blue belt.
He's very
this
good.
Polish guy, 110 kilos of muscle. He's actually a stonemason. Like he's out of a fucking comic book or something. Yeah, bro. So like he's, so it just checks, like it just all checks out. But he's really nice dude, and obviously a handful. And I did, not even a heel hook. Like it would have been an inside heel hook, but I just had a similar grip, not the same as the way Mikey does his Mikey lock, but I essentially clamped down his foot, tensioned it, and just bridged into the side of the knee.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why they differentiate it, right?
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So it's super easy for the referees to differentiate the difference between the techniques used, right? So that's the general rule. But obviously there was like the basic ones, like no can opener, no attacks on the spinal column, except you could do twisters. So I guess there were attacks on the spinal column. I think that's the brunt of it. So that's very similar to grappling industry is what it used to be. And the overtime, let's talk about that. So it was very interesting. So imagine EBI, standard EBI overtime, you could choose back or spiderweb, right? Those are your options. But to make it easier, quote unquote, easier for the referees to establish the positions, they made them way more, I want to say, easier to escape. So it was very different, right?
Okay.
Let me explain. So on the back, normally when you, in EBI, you're allowed a seatbelt and your opponent is allowed 2 grips, 2-on-1, right? 2 grips defend.
Yeah, and you're allowed hooks, obviously.
Yeah, hooks in, you have the back and a seatbelt. In this competition, you're not allowed a seatbelt. You have to have hand-to-hand grip, so you can palm to palm, S grip, whatever grip you want, so long as hand-to-hand, but you couldn't use a seatbelt. You had to be below their shoulder. So you could have an underhook, and then the other arm that would normally be a seatbelt arm next to their neck had to be popped down below their shoulder. So that was the starting position. But I don't understand why, but that's what it was. The spiderweb position was not the traditional spiderweb. The only grips you could take were both the attacker and defender had to have palm to palm. So if you're in the spiderweb position and you're attacking, you have to be palm to palm. You can't have one hand on the mat. You can't have one, you can't be off to the side or whatever. 90 degrees, exactly, palm to palm. And your opponent defending, and this is the most important, normally you would want a hand on your bicep and then a hand on their hamstring. That is the best defending position from starting in that spiderweb position. However, you couldn't do that. You had to go palm to palm as well. So you're allowed your feet cross as well.
Was that the same for the
all
advanced
divisions?
Yeah, right.
All divisions. Yep. They standardize it across the board. Interesting take. I think the reason they said they did that is because it made it easier for the referees to establish the position. No debate, no questions asked, just super easy, very clear, defined rules, super simple across the board.
Right. Didn't come to overtime for you though, did it, Kieren?
No.
No.
Luckily, I got my ass kicked. No. Yeah. And it was a round robin format and a true round robin. So there was no finals, there was no semifinals or anything like that unless you had a very large division and there were 2 sides of the round robin. But it was a true round robin, so everyone versus everyone, and then it's tallied on points.
Yep. So you had 3 matches, all of which I've watched, and I mean, there's not a huge amount to break down, to be honest. You and I briefly chatted about it a little bit, but one of the things that instantly stood out to me, which is not something that I don't think we ever spoke about it on a podcast, was when you were moving to Sweden, we had some type of conversation about what are things that I can work on while I'm looking for a gym to train at.
Yeah.
And one of the things I had mentioned was, I said, I would like you to work on your footwork when you're standing. You're very heavy on your feet and you're not very, you lack a certain ability to float when you're doing stand up. And you were like, yeah, I know I've got flat feet. I'm super heavy on my feet and whatever. And I said something along the lines of, look, I'm not an S&C coach, but, obviously there's lots of agility training like NFL players and shit do with all those ladders on the ground and whatever other probably a million different workouts you can do to develop that.
Yeah.
And it was one of the first things that stood out to me, which was funny because the stand-up portion of your 3 matches was very quick, out of your 3 matches, 2 of them you pulled guard, and on the third one, the other guy pulled guard. But I did notice it stood out to me straight away that you were more agile on your feet. You're way more on your toes, not even necessarily like physically visually on your toes, but you know what I mean? Like you were more on your toes and
Definitely.
way less sort of like stompy. And you just looked way, way better on your feet. But then when I said that to you, you said you actually didn't feel very, very comfortable in the stand-up portion.
No, I didn't feel comfortable in the stand-up at all. I felt quite the opposite. I wanted to get off the feet as soon as possible. Why
do you think that was? Because in a lot of your previous comps that, have happened in Sydney prior to the move, you quite comfortably stood and very rarely were taken down or pulled guard. You would typically get some type of snap down or shoot a blast double or something. And
it's the points. It's the point system. With points, I'm never going to concede on the feet. Like, I don't know why, but for some reason, and this, if we roll back the clock and I did it all again, it'd probably be different. But I had it in my mind that because I had the goal, I did not want to end up in overtime. That was like a given. I did not want to end up in overtime, and that influenced my first match, which we can talk about. But
can I just ask, sorry, before you go on, like, I don't know the answer to this question. How do they choose who gets to start first in the attacking position? Oh, they flip a coin. Okay.
Yeah.
So was it just a generic, I don't want to end up in overtime, or was
I wanted all submissions. So my goal was I want to win, obviously, first and foremost. That was the meta goal, if you will. But the goal within the goal was I want to win in regular time with a submission. I did not want to be in overtime because I didn't want to take the risk. Because I didn't want to have the situation where maybe I'm dominating for 5 minutes and my opponent was stalling and then uses all their energy in overtime, which happened in some of the other matches throughout the day.
And just explain for people who don't know, so you explained that overtime starts you get to choose when you're the attacker, which position you start in, but then how does it work from there?
Yeah. So how it ran was whoever goes first, in my opinion, has the advantage, as in who's escaping first. Anyway, so you choose whether you want to be in spiderweb armbar position or you want the back, right? And then you have 2 minutes on the clock for my division, and it's effectively done on submission or escape. So the clock will stop as soon as they're out. And to be out of the position, you can be anywhere else, essentially, so long as you're not in that back attack position or you're not in that armbar position, and they're not threatening a submission. So if you end up, let's say you get to your back, say you start in back control, you get to your back, you escape, but then your opponent like smoothly transitions to a head arm choke, for example, then the clock will keep going until you escape that submission threat. As soon as there's no more submission threat, you're out, okay? So that is how it works. But here's the kicker, right? If you submit them in the first like 10 seconds, for example, right? And you get a submission, and then your opponent escapes before that 10 seconds, they win. So it was just on escape or submit. And then that's when so a sub holds no more weight. Exactly.
Is that how it works in regular EBI?
No.
In regular EBI, the sub
trumps
rank.
Everything.
And then if both people hit a sub, it's who hit it quicker.
Exactly. But I saw people lose on, and I could be wrong, I could be fucking this up, but I'm pretty sure I saw people lose when they got a submission and their opponent escaped faster. I don't know if that is, I might be fucking that up completely, but I'm not sure. That's what I observed.
That's very weird.
I agree. Very weird.
Because whenever I teach escaping the back, I usually mention something along the lines of like, because when you're grip fighting, I mentioned something along the lines of yeah, if they're just keeping the seatbelt, it'll be very hard for you to get this grip and do that and pass their arm over your head or whatever the escape is. But I often say they're not just going to hold the seatbelt, because if all they do is hold the seatbelt, they're never attacking you, right? Like they're obviously going to, they have to disconnect their seatbelt to try to get a 2-on-1 or to try to do straight jacket control and all this sort of stuff. And that's where your opportunities to fight back and whatever happen. But if someone, it's very hard to escape the back if you have someone, you know, two people who are similar skill level. And if you don't believe me, try this next time you're training. Get someone similar skill level and just ask them that their job is just to stay on the back. Like not to attack you, just keep back control. And you'll see, like, it's very difficult to get out because they don't open anywhere, right? But when someone attacks, they have to concede some level of that seatbelt control to gain control of something else, or to grab a collar, or if it was in the gi, or to grab a, you know, whatever.
So on the Tuesday,
very odd rules.
On the Tuesday before the comp, we did exactly that. We practiced overtime. We got together at a lunchtime, and the guys that were competing and some of the guys who were helping us, and we drilled the back control and the spiderweb position, and I found exactly that. It was way harder than I thought to escape when all they're trying to do is lock you down. It was fucking way harder. I was shocked. I was like, I thought this was going to be easy. I don't know why I thought that, but so and that also influenced my decision. Like, I do not want to be in. Well, I wanted to win anyway, and I didn't want to win on overtime. And because I don't know. So
but it's funny. It's because that's really weird, because I've done drills sometimes in the gym where I put my students to essentially start on the back, and this is sort of something like I'm going over the top, just trying to beat through their heads. Not maybe importance isn't the right word, but just really get through to them the mechanical function of how a seatbelt works in terms of controlling the shoulders and all this, and it, you know, keeping the back exposed, re-exposing the back and all this. So I'll say to them that, I want you're not allowed to submit, you just have to stay on the back. And then what often happens is that the person escapes. But the reason the person escapes is because they know, they've just heard that the person's not allowed to submit them. So they're allowed to fight the hooks with their hands willy-nilly because they don't have to worry about their neck. But in this situation, that's not the case, right? Like, yes, the person could take a strategic approach and just be like, well, I'm banking on myself to escape quicker than he can. I'm not even going to open up to attack and just keep the seatbelt. But obviously, if the guy then put both his hands down to fight the hooks and his chin was looking to the ceiling, you'd rip the choke.
100%.
So I could
have got this wrong, but that's what I observed. I'm pretty sure I observed, you know, people winning when they escape faster than the submission. I don't know if that's how it ended up. Maybe I got it wrong, but whatever. But regardless, I didn't want to end up in overtime, so that influenced how I went about the match.
Yeah.
Matches.
So let's look at they were all three matches played out differently, but there was a couple of similarities. So the first two things I noticed after you being much lighter on the feet was how good your guard pulls were in the two matches you pulled guard. You pulled guard really efficiently into single leg X or ashigarami for those people, or, you know, a leg entanglement, whatever you want to fucking call it. But you did a really good job at, as you sat, like you really sat under them and like, you know, almost didn't arm drag them, but you know what I mean? Like dragged them over the top of you to get in under the legs really nicely. One of those matches, you footlocked the guy super quick, and that was great. You know, there wasn't really much to dissect in that video. You just pulled guard and footlocked him from memory. But then one of the other ones, you went for the straight footlock and quite correctly, in my opinion, from what I could see from the camera angle, decided to bail on the footlock and come on top, which I thought was a good move.
Yeah, so those two guys were teammates.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was really interesting. The guy
as in from the exact same gym.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
so
that's never super fun, is it?
Yeah. But so the guy that I footlocked quickly. So basically, the way it went down, we exchanged grip fighting for literally like 5 seconds. Literally 5 seconds, maybe a couple seconds longer. And I just was not feeling it. That was my second match of the day. I wasn't feeling, like I said, I wasn't feeling comfortable on the feet. I wasn't really feeling up to wrestling. So I just pulled guard straight into the footlock. I felt him out and yeah, saw the opening, took it. But his teammate watched me do it, like literally was filming for him and coaching his mate, right? And then the guy that the match we're talking about now, that's the guy that was watching. So I had in the back of my mind, like, he probably knows what I'm going to do. He saw me just do it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So I wrestled a little bit longer. And then the same sort of thing. I was like, I couldn't be fucked standing on my, standing. I couldn't be fucked wrestling. So I'm going to pull into the same footlock and see if I get it. And he's, because he was ready for it a bit more, he was a bit more aggressive in his foot slip and he was able to slip the grip. And I wasn't able to finish, right? So yeah, I ditched and came on top and went straight into a pass. He shot a triangle, which it was a good shot, but I never felt in trouble. I just turned the corner super aggressively, popped straight out of the triangle attempt.
Yeah, he did shoot it quite quickly.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, you turned the corner and then quite solidly transitioned to mount and then what looked like a super tight arm triangle.
Yeah, because he tried to go for a buggy choke, right? So we're in
side
control.
He did too. And I heard whoever was filming for you, I heard he's looking for the buggy.
Yeah, it was not even a threat.
Well, he got nowhere close to it, but
no, not even close. Because I had a really, really deep side control position. I had the cross face was consolidated. My elbow was practically touching my knee on his hip, so I had his hips closed down like as much as you could possibly fucking get them closed down. So I had him controlled pretty great pinning, top pin position, and he passed his arm over my head to try and get that buggy choke. Right, but the problem with that is when he couldn't get it and he was stuck there because I pinned my head against his because I knew that was a dominant arm position to be in. He tried to bridge to and shrimp out to regain his guard, but I used that to transition to a mount. But I didn't stay in mount for a second. Because I had his arm already well and truly across his head in a head arm triangle position. I kept my I just went off mount straight away. I kept my knee on his hip and sprawled down.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. The very well-timed mount that sometimes you take for granted, the things that you like sometimes need to teach to newer students. And it wasn't long ago that I mentioned this in a class, but you can quite easily, as you gain experience, I think like in anything in life that you gain experience at and become more knowledgeable at, you can start to lose touch a little bit with how little some other people know. But that concept of that, well, if someone is committing both their feet to the mat to bridge and lift their hips off the mat, they don't really have that ability to then just catch your leg and regain half guard for free as you try to go to mount.
Yep.
So I noticed that as well, that very well-timed transition. And I actually teach that same concept with this particular half guard pass that I like to do that is mainly only a gi specific half guard pass where you end up like you compromise. I wouldn't say you don't compromise your base, but it looks like you have no base to one particular side, which I guess is true. You kind of have very minimal base to one side. However, the only way the person on the bottom can take advantage of that is by doing a bridge that requires them to let go of your leg that's trapped in half guard. So if they tried to go, they've got no base there, I'm going to bridge that way and sweep them, you just take your leg out of half guard and stomp it on the mat, and all of a sudden you've got this whole leg of base and you're not getting swept, and you've also now got side control. So yeah, I did notice the very well-timed mount, and it also just reminded me of sometimes that's something that you forget. People need to have that explained to them sometimes. They don't always necessarily realize that on their own, that, oh yeah, I've never thought about that. If someone is bridging, they're committing their feet to the ground, they can't throw their legs up in the air and reclaim half guard for free.
Yeah. Yeah. Straight to mount. Normally in that position, if I take that mount, when their arm's not normally across their face already in that arm triangle position. So normally that is where I like to work a back take, right? So so to mount and then in no gi, get their arms up and work for the back. But because I was already there, it felt like the submission was free, essentially.
Yeah. I wish I were better at arm triangles, because a lot of my half guard passes and a lot of my mounts, whether it's through half guard or from side control, come from having my head up under that armpit in buggy choke territory, if you will. So it's a very easy and to some degree very seamless transition to an arm triangle.
Yeah.
I'm just bloody terrible at them, bro. I'm just so bad. Yeah. And we've spoken about this on previous episodes and on air and off air. It's just not I don't know. It's just not a submission that I'm particularly good at. And I'm fine with that, because I'm sure there's people far better than me who have submissions that they don't gel with, but I wish I were better at them. And I work on them every now and again, but it's definitely not my strong suit. Maybe I got to work on my bicep, the size of my biceps. I don't know.
Do some bicep curls, baby. But it's really funny that the submissions that I got come from positions that I've been working on lately. Like I've been working on arm triangles in the last 4 months or so, or even 6. Like it's something that's improved a lot in my game, because I never used to be able to finish either from that position, and it was always, that was a bit of a crank. But now I'm actually getting the choking mechanic for it, and the same with that leg entanglement. So I remember with the episode we were saying, what are we working on for the episode 155? We're going to talk about how the last block of training is gone and what we've been working on and everything like that. And I remember that I revealed I was going to be working on X guard. Well, in the comp, I pulled into single leg X, but I almost immediately in every case transitioned to X guard to off balance and dig that heel. So it was interesting, and I didn't even think about it. I just did it, and then my teammate who was watching on the car ride home to me is like, "Yeah, you use X guard really well to off balance your opponent." So I was like, "What did I?" I thought in my mind for some reason I stayed in single leg, but no, it's I went single leg, and I used that to pull guard, establish the grip on the ankle, and as soon as I had it, I went straight to X and extended them to lift. You know that technique that you teach, how you go to X, extend them away to naturally lift the foot
off the
yeah. That's exactly how I finished all of the straight foot locks, except for the first one where I used it to extend, get a better bite, and then I stomped down on the hip on top. So I came back through, but minor details.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, one of the best ways to defend a straight foot lock is just by standing up and planting that foot on the mat. So that's not to say you can't be straight foot locked when you're standing. You definitely can, if people know how to do it. But essentially, think about it this way: the foot and ankle requires some type of hyperextension and rotation. A good foot lock is done either like a toe hold or like a Aoki lock, which is kind of like a heel hook-ish thing.
Yeah.
But if the sole of the foot is flat on the mat, it can only, the mat is essentially supporting, is a splint for your foot, right? So it's minimizing the amount that it can be hyperextended and rotated. So what Kieren's talking about is, even though the opponent is standing, you can extend, and you kind of extend and turn them in a way as if you wanted to expose their back, if that makes sense. And that starts to lift their heel and, potentially all their toes, their whole foot off the mat. And then you can adjust it, and, then you can start extending on it, stomp on the hip. And, by the time
it's
their butt
so hard
hits
to
the mat,
defend it.
If someone is good at that, it's really hard, because you want to, once you get the bite, so to speak, on the straight foot lock, it's then primarily, depending on the variation of your straight foot lock, but to just simplify it, it's then primarily about increasing the distance between the ankle and the hip joints.
Yep.
Right. So that's why people fight the feet off the hips, because if they can bring their hip closer to their ankle, right, you're not able to like gap the joint. But there are different variations of straight foot locks where the knee can be as bent as you like and you can still get away with it. But it's, you know, different, slightly different techniques.
An important point I need to mention though is the first match where I sat back on the foot lock. And with the situation we're talking about, Aoki locks were not allowed in the comp.
Okay, right.
So they normally they are at blue belt, but they were not allowed. And my opponent started to slip the heel a little bit on my first attempt. When I first sat back and I put him in X guard, so I sat back into single leg X, and then I put him straight into X guard and extended. He was slipping his heel. He was doing the right thing. He was stood up straight away. Trying to get his foot to the mat, and he was slipping his heel. Because of that heel slippage, and I still had the submission, it was turning into a rotation. It was turning into a Aoki lock. So what I had to do is, and he was like pointing to the ref at one point, and I completely ignored him. But what I had to do was dig it, re-dig, and then come over with the top foot and stomp to just remove all ambiguity and basically remove all the rotation and go to the gapping that you're talking about. And I just went straight for the gapping. And as soon as that was on, it was over.
Yeah, because a true Aoki lock requires like the majority of the heel to completely slip out.
Exactly.
Whereas I'm not going to try explain this on a podcast, because even explaining it in person to students that I'm physically putting their body in the right place, it's super hard to do. But Kieren will know what I'm talking about with this particular variation of a straight foot lock, which would maybe be in the middle of a straight foot lock and an Aoki lock, where you don't let the whole heel slip out. Like, I wonder if you could have gotten away with that. Like,
oh, definitely.
Because it really doesn't pop the whole heel out at all, but it functions essentially the same as an Aoki lock.
Yeah, I think my opponent...
Game in the system, bro. Game in the system.
Yeah, he was a little bit like... he was a nice guy, and I spoke to him afterwards. Really, really, really nice guy. But I think in the moment, he was a little bit more concerned about it turning into an Aoki lock and getting the ref's attention than he was defending. If he put all that energy into not worrying about pointing at it and just fucking defending, he might have gotten out, and maybe I would have abandoned it or whatever. It could have gone differently. But I think, you know, in that moment, you just need to focus on doing jiu-jitsu. Don't stop and get the ref's attention. I think that can be said for all competitions. I don't know.
Yeah, agreed. So just to circle back though, so there were 3 matches. 2 you pulled guard, 1 the other guy pulled guard. So on the 2 you pulled guard, 1 you finished with the foot lock, 1 you had to come up and pass and get the arm triangle. So this third one, you know, disregarding the order of your matches we're in, this third one, your opponent pulled guard.
Yes.
And then you ended up sitting back and finishing the foot lock. So let's talk a little bit about your top game, your pressure on top, and the decisions that led to you to sit back and take the foot. Because prior to going to Sweden, your game was top game, right?
100%.
And now you've been working on guard and whatever. So, you know, so your pressure on top's always quite good and whatever, but talk us through why you couldn't make progress with that, and, you know, as a result, you sat back.
I definitely think I could have passed this guard. I was very close a few times. I found the opening. I found the guard pass. The only thing the decision I made to sit back on the footlock came when I got an indicator from my teammate. There was 2 minutes left. So I'd already been working to pass the guard for, notwithstanding our little, you know, fucking around, for about, you know, 2.5, 3 minutes, right? And I knew I could pass if I put energy into it, but I wasn't sure if I could finish him after I passed as quickly. So I made the strategic decision that, hey, I'm going to sit back, go for this submission. Worst case scenario, if I don't get it, there's fucking zero chance then I'm going to get submitted from my guard. I just do not see it happening unless he sits back on me and gets a cheeky footlock, right? You know, that was my thought process. I was like, there's zero chance. I'm not going to be submitted. Therefore, I'll take it at the worst case scenario. I'll be in guard where I get to air quote rest a little bit, and I can go in air quote with more energy into the overtime. That was the only reason I sat back. It was to just Hail Mary, go for the submission. If I don't get it, worst case scenario, I'm very comfortable in my guard.
That's quite funny because just tonight at training, I was training with Dan, who you know, and for most people who don't know Dan, so Dan's a purple belt from the gym who is incredibly difficult to submit when you're on his back. His back defense, not necessarily his, like, man, when his back escaping comes up, like, levels up to the level of just his back defense, he'll be like impossible to submit.
That's good. That's a key point.
Yeah, he's already almost impossible to submit when you're on his back. His ability to win the grip fight, and even when he was a blue belt, right? Like, I mean, yeah, he's purple belt now, but like since he was maybe a 2-stripe blue belt, he's been so hard to submit when you're on his back. Gi, no gi, he just wins the grip fight. I don't even know why, like how he's so good at it.
He's got a knack for it.
Yeah, he's so good at having another dude behind him. I don't know. It's just crazy.
A lot of practice. Yeah.
So I was rolling with him tonight, and I was on his back, and he catches the clock out of the corner of his eye. He's like, 50 seconds to go. Can you sub me in 50 seconds? Just kind of cheeky banter mid-roll. And then I was like, I made the strategic decision that I was like, well, like finish you on your back in 50 seconds? Probably not, right? So I just like let him escape the back and then just sat on a footlock, and he was like, no. And then I tapped him with literally 2 seconds left to go. And he was like, God damn it.
Tell you what's funny, I've gone on the record so many times saying I hate it when people sit back on footlocks. I think it's like a bitch move.
And look at you now.
And look at me now. Pulling guard and sit back on footlocks. Who is this guy?
But it also goes to show that I've said this multiple times, that no rule set is perfect.
Yeah.
And even what a lot of people consider the best rule set in ADCC is still so shit in the sense that you go into a finals match and you're not allowed to pull guard or you'll get a negative point, but there's no points yet. So Gordon Ryan's just like, oh no, you took me down. Oh, silly me dangling my leg out there for you to grab,
Yeah.
I'm not, this isn't a diss on Gordon. It's just on the rule set of,
yeah.
So then it's not too dissimilar to you not necessarily wanting to stand in this. You're like, man,
exactly.
the amount of
energy.
You have a finite amount of resource, right?
Yeah.
And the amount of resources it costs to take someone down, typically, I mean, obviously if you fucking Bo Nickel or whatever, or Jordan Burroughs, you'll be like, what do you mean? It's not that hard, right? But for the majority of jiu-jitsu people, the amount of effort it takes to successfully take someone down and then get rewarded for nothing other than top position, which for a lot of people, they would prefer bottom position anyway. Like it just.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm agnostic now. I've reached the level where I'm comfortable with my guard enough that in a comp, I'm agnostic. I could be top or bottom. Previously, like you mentioned, even as soon as my last comp that I did before I left, I would be like, nah, top or bust, top or nothing. But now I'm like, I'll play both, and I don't really care. But I find that really interesting. My decision making that I made in this comp would be completely different if there was points. My point style jiu-jitsu, I've discovered it's so much different to my submission only, like polar opposites almost. And yeah, I just reflecting back on it, I think that's the most revealing part of all of this. And it makes me wonder what my game would be like or how successful I'd be in a points comp if I came in with the same mindset. Maybe it would be better.
Well, yeah, like I'm strongly of the belief that the rules and restrictions placed upon any sport the governing guidelines as to what makes it fun, entertaining, right? Like if everything was just like, open house, it doesn't make any sense. The restrictions are what make it fun and entertaining, and you have to, for lack of a better term, you have to learn how to like rig the system, to game the system like everyone else is doing it. So even a sport that has rules far less ambiguous than jiu-jitsu, let's take tennis, for example, where the only thing they can change is the surface that you play on. Like, I don't know a lot about tennis, but I know that tennis balls don't bounce as high on a clay court, right, opposed to a grass court, which I believe most of the big games are played on. So like a tennis player will potentially change the way they play when they're playing on clay versus when they're playing on grass, because the ball behaves differently, and the rules are what make it unique and entertaining, and the rules should be built in a way to prompt the entertainment. So you definitely have to fight intelligently. And I think this is where IBJJF to some degree gets some unwarranted flack. People complain about the rules and whatever, but I don't know, man. I've seen plenty of dog shit, boring, snooze fest, no time limit, submission only matches, and they suck. Right, they absolutely suck. But place some restrictions in there and some rule restrictions. Like let's look at even the most recent quintet that happened in Japan. For those who don't know, it was like the team event. So you had B Team, Polaris, Sakuraba, and 10th Planet were the 4 teams. A lot of these guys, their careers were built around heel hooking people. This was an event that didn't allow heel hooks, right? And it was still super good, super entertaining, great matches. You got to see a lot of stuff. Like the rules are, I know some people that don't like that rule set, but I spoke to a friend who said it's his personal favorite rule set, and he loves those events. He thinks they're so entertaining. So yeah, you have to play differently based on the rules, and it's the athlete's responsibility to learn those rules and see if you can change your game or manipulate them, find a loophole or something to make it work for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, experience definitely helps. The fact that I've competed so many times in a points-based rule set, and I've competed in this specific, like, you can reap, but you can't, heel hook, you can do this, but you can't do that. You can knee bar, but you can't, I've competed in that rule set before as well. So it enabled, and this is another thing I discovered. I don't get lizard brain. I don't get the tunnel vision during comps. I'm able to make critical decisions.
But it can still happen, right? Look at recently with Kieren doing the accidental, lateral knee bar on Mika Galval at what was the event? I forget the event, but he got DQ'd, right? Because it wasn't allowed in the rules. And there was a lot of online banter between, him and whoever and Marigali and Mika's dad and whatever. There was a lot of shit that went back and forth. But at least from what I could see in Kainen's post-fight interview, he was just kind of straight up like, man, I fucked up. I just got confused with what I could do and couldn't do. And oh man, I made a mistake.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I've had an opponent try and toe hold me in a blue belt level comp before. And he just, fuck, I forgot. He got DQ'd. It's just like, it happens, Yeah. But I mean, it was a good experience. And I had a look on my smooth comp. This was my 7th comp at blue belt. So that's a decent amount.
Yeah, look at you go. It's more than some of my students, that's for sure. More than a lot of my students.
More than some total.
Yes. So I wanted to, then the last thing competition related I wanted to ask was, you had mentioned, not in this episode, but you had mentioned to me, you felt like you weren't super fit for this. And even last episode, you mentioned that you weren't that concerned if you didn't make weight because this is just kind of like a warm up for an upcoming competition. It's a bigger competition that you're planning to do. So when is that competition again? And based on this competition, what are you going to do /change in preparation for the upcoming comp?
So the upcoming comp is in 4 weeks. And I mean, I mentioned in a previous episode that at my gym, because it's the start of the semester, we haven't been doing a lot of rolling time. So my on-mat conditioning is quite poor. And I haven't been doing any cardio to compensate. So I've been doing pretty much fuck all, to be honest. And it's a big part of the reason I didn't want to stand up as well, because cardio is my asset. I thrive in that 6-minute time, like of maximal effort for 6 minutes. That's my zone, right? That's my optimal zone. And this just wasn't on my side. Also, I need to mention that I hadn't eaten much the night before, and I hadn't eaten that morning because I was concerned I wasn't going to make weight. I ended up weighing under, like 1.5 kilos under, so I could have eaten in the morning, but whatever. So I was quite low on fuels, like carbohydrate. I was quite low. I wasn't dehydrated as such, but it could have been a bit better. And all those factors combined just made me feel a bit sluggish. So what am I going to do for the next comp? Cardio. I'm going to follow what I recommend, my cardio protocols that I recommend, VO2 max training, the 4x4x4. And I'm also going to be doing some medium distance zone 2 training combined with high intensity intervals, hill sprints, things like that. And of course, still lifting, maintaining my lifting schedule. And I'm also going to be rolling a bit more. So I'll be going to the open mat sessions instead of the evening sessions. So I'm gonna look at dropping one of the evening sessions and go to our lunchtime open mat instead.
Yeah, nice. So mainly looking to fix the cardio sluggish feeling.
And and it's more of a mental game than anything. I probably only came in like 10-15% under my like normal optimal, but to me that, I don't know, it got in my head. I don't know. I probably would have been fine, but I just felt tired.
And the upcoming comp has more regular weight divisions, so you're less concerned
standard
about
IBJJF. So it's 88 kilo in the gi, regulation, blue belt, no weird
easy
rules.
make, yep.
Yeah, easily make 80. I normally weigh in 82 in my gi, so I make that. Yeah,
yeah. So you can go the division to below if you want.
I probably should. I think we spoke about this before. If I was actually going to take competing seriously and go for something like Worlds or whatever, or like a big competition, I would 100% do 79. Like
you'd either drop down to middleweight, or you would lift a fuck ton and try put on.
I'd have to fucking lift a fuck ton and take a fuck ton of supplements to get that. Man, like I could not fill up to 88 unless I got fat. I just could not.
Well, you could. I mean, technically you could.
It took me years, man. It took me years.
You could get Galval huge. Just fucking.
Yeah, with fucking Galval supplements. Galval Asahi. Galval fucking relationship with Jesus, maybe. I could get there, right. But fuck.
Well, man, good. Like, I know it was just a little side competition, but it's good to get that first one out of the way after a bit of a hiatus. And also good, now you can put on your resume that you have competed internationally.
Yes.
Right, so that always
international, one goal internationally.
Yeah, it's it's all about how you word it, isn't it?
Yeah, The gym that it was hosted at too. Shout out to them. I think they're one of the only jiu-jitsu gyms in that town, in that little city. And man, it was sick. They had like Viking shit all over the walls. They had samurai swords. They had like old school fucking muskets and like images of Vikings with like axes hung up. And man, it was a really, really nice gym with an awesome foyer. And then you walk down into like the actual training room. It was like walking down into a dungeon, like the Blue Basement sort of feel. And they had like a cage, an MMA cage. And that's where I did my match in. And then they had like a boxing ring. And then they had the main mat space as well. So it was really awesome. So shout out to them. It was a fucking really cool event. Run really well. Everything was on time. The referees were great. It was really cool.
Yeah, sick. All right. Well, I want to move on to the little something interesting, which I only have a little tidbit today. So last episode we didn't do these, but I'm actually going to combine the one I was going to say last week with the one I was going to say today, because they're both just really, one is literally a today I learned that I read and I was like, what the fuck? That's crazy. And the other's a bit more jiu-jitsu related. So I'll do the jiu-jitsu one first, which is just a little piece that I wasn't super aware of, but I guess it made sense, which is just that, like if I were to ask you, who is the most famous martial artist of all time?
Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee, right? I think most people in the martial arts, combat sports world probably know that, right? And it was just that yeah, he was a big fan of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and incorporated some of its principles into his ground fighting techniques of his own martial art he created, which was called Jeet Kune Do. Right? Bruce, from my understanding, copped a lot of flack. He coming from the Gung Fu, so not Kung Fu, Gung Fu with a G, I believe. Again, I'm not a Bruce Lee historian, but I believe he copped a lot of flack from the Gung Fu / Kung Fu community because he would just kind of cherry pick the best techniques, essentially like the OG MMA fighter, if you will. And his interest in jiu-jitsu contributed to some degree to the early exposure in the United States. And, I just thought it was an interesting little tidbit. Obviously, most people know the story about like the Gracie challenges and the Gracie family and all that, but this is just a little article. I came along and read that and I thought, oh, that's interesting. For those who don't know, Bruce Lee was a fan of jiu-jitsu too. The other thing that I saw that I was like, what? That's fucking crazy. Nothing to do with jiu-jitsu, right? This was literally a today I learnt on Reddit. I wouldn't say I'm like, how would I describe my interest in space? Is maybe I have more of an interest in space and rockets and NASA and stuff than someone who doesn't. But that's about it, right? Like I watch
fucking what?
What I'm saying is I don't know anything.
What did you say?
Well, what I'm saying is that
I have more of an interest in rockets than someone who doesn't.
Yeah, that's
Adam Childs, 2023.
That's literally what I'm saying. So I don't know anything about rockets and space and stuff. But if you have a person who would never, gun to their head, watch a documentary about NASA, I might click on that documentary, right?
Okay.
Like I find the subject interesting, but I'm not educated about the subject. So for all I know, this is a very well-known fact, but for me, as I know some things about space, I didn't know this. So on the first moon landing, right, with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and they went down to the moon, and you had oh God, I can't remember his name. Something Collins, I believe, was the guy who stayed up in the whatever the name of the spacecraft was that would orbit the moon while they were down there. NASA had like agreed upon, and I don't know if the astronauts knew this or not, but NASA had agreed upon that if something went wrong, like as in with the ability of the astronauts to launch back off the moon and reconnect with the craft that was orbiting the moon, their plan was just to cold turkey cut communications with Neil and Buzz on the moon, and just essentially leave them to either run out of oxygen or kill themselves. Like that was their, like, because there was no, if something went wrong, there was no saving them, and so that was their protocol that they put in. They were just going to cold turkey, just cut communications with them. And I just read that again. I'm not educated on this subject. I didn't read an article. I just literally read a Today I Learned. But I know a few things about space and the Apollo missions and stuff. And I was like, holy fucking shit, that is crazy. But I guess, but then I was kind of,
thanks for coming. No fucking catch you later. No, any last words? Just a fucking boom.
But I was also like, well, what do you do? What do you do?
Talk about getting ghosted. Jesus Christ.
Fuck. But yeah, anyway. That was just a little thing that I saw and I was like, holy shit, that's fucking crazy.
It's a bit harsh.
Anyway, they're my two something interestings.
Well, my something interesting is this could actually be a full episode. So yeah, anyway, I came across a podcast episode from the Bulletproof for BJJ podcast. And
I've heard of them.
Their topic was the most influential people in BJJ. Now, if you want to listen to their take, then you want to stop this now. So this will contain spoilers. So I'm ruining their episodes. So it's both a shout out and a fuck you. This is our show. So
for those who don't know, Kieren and I know the guys who run the Bulletproof podcast very well, JT and Joey. So we've Joey's one of my black belts, and I've known JT for years. We lived together in Brazil. So for the newer listeners, we know the Bulletproof guys very, very well.
Okay, so
anyway, go on.
So if let's steal. Basically, I just wanted to talk about it, but it's not like a full episode because I'm not going to steal their episode, right? But the most influential people in BJJ, if I had to ask you that question off the top of your head without having time to prepare, who would you say, and make the argument, make a case for who the most influential person in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is?
Do I only get to pick one?
Yes. Is or was. It could be past, it could be present, but basically the whole thing is the most influential on the sport. Who's helped the sport grow the most, who has done the most for the sport.
I don't know, man. It's like whether you verse history versus present day. Like, I mean, obviously the very quickest connection is to say something like it's hard to not make a case for someone like Gordon Ryan, but then it's like, oh, well, or do I go historically and do I, pick someone like, like Carlos Gracie or Helio Gracie, or do I pick Royce Gracie, like who was the original Gracie in the UFC. So I don't know, like maybe Royce, maybe, but then it's different times because nowadays you live with social media and stuff, and guys like Gordon or John Danaher or Craig Jones can do huge fucking things, but obviously they can only do what they do because of people like Royce, because of people like Healy. So I don't know, man. I don't know how to pick one.
Very interesting. You brought up some names that were discussed on the Bulletproof Boys brought up as well and discussed.
I haven't listened to the episode. Did they have very strong opinions?
Well, they had a curveball. They had a spoiler. So again, if you want the spoiler, go listen to the episode. But yeah, there was the reveal, and I even left a comment on their YouTube like, "Fuck, I didn't see that coming." JT basically teased at the start of the episode. He's like, "I've got a bit of a reveal. I've got a hot take here. Who I think?" And he said, Dana White.
It's the fucking dumbest thing. Well, I don't know.
No. You have to listen to his explanation because it was actually really like well thought out and well presented. And I'm going to butcher his argument, but basically his argument is, okay, the one person you didn't mention, who I think is a crime that you didn't mention, is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has single-handedly done more for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than any other human alive, past, living, present, dead, whatever. Literally has done more for the sport than anyone, hands down. And I think, the Gracies get a lot of credit because they did popularize, they did help to develop the actual sport. That's why it's called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They weren't the only ones. There was a lot of people that contributed to that, and it's come a long way since then. So we obviously are indebted to them. But in terms of raw numbers, growing the sport, no one's done more than Joe Rogan. But JT's argument was, would Joe Rogan be the man he is if it wasn't for Dana White and the UFC? Well, basically, the argument is, would Joe Rogan be the man he is without the UFC? And UFC, would it be where it is without Dana White? So it was like, the parent of the parent. That was the thought process. And then he spoke about the history of Dana White and how the Contender Series, the TV show, saved the UFC, how it's now like the biggest thing ever. And it once upon a time, it nearly died. If there was no UFC, MMA wouldn't be as popular. And MMA is the biggest reason that people get into jiu-jitsu. But I would argue that Joe Rogan is a bigger influence than the UFC in people actually getting into the sport. Because not everyone that listens to Joe Rogan watches MMA, watches UFC specifically, but everyone that listens to Rogan is always bombarded with how good jiu-jitsu is, the benefits of jiu-jitsu. He's always talking about it.
It's an interesting topic or / conversation. Like it's a conversation that there's no real right answer. It's like when people have conversation.
I don't know.
Well, it's like when people have conversations about who the greatest of all time is and stuff like that. Especially because it also depends. Like, what's the metric? Like, are you asking who has contributed more? To people just trialing or doing jiu-jitsu, who has contributed more in terms of like evolving the sport to become the most technical martial art you've ever seen, you know, or who was, because then it's just like splitting hairs, you know, like imagine if you go, you know, oh, who was, like, let's take for argument's sake, let's imagine if like, okay, who's someone who's going back to my random thing, like space and stuff, like it's very well known that SpaceX / Elon Musk like revolutionized the rocket industry with reusable rockets, right? I think most people are aware of that. But let's say, hypothetically, Elon Musk was just some homeless bum, autistic savant, but then some other dude came along and bankrolled it. It's like, well, who, you know, you go like, oh, Elon must do it. Yeah, but he couldn't have done it without Dana White bankrolling him. Like, you know, like, oh, Joe Rogan couldn't have done it without Dana, you know, or like, so I think all of those names mentioned. I mean, Dana White, I find a bit of a stretch to bring into the conversation. I find that similar to saying like, you know, yeah, but like the Wright brothers couldn't have done it without that dude who gave them the wood to build the plane, you know, like, you know, I find it a bit of a stretch, but yeah, 100%, like all the historic Gracie figures, definitely Joe Rogan. I didn't consider that, but for sure, I've had so many students. I always ask new students, why did you decide to try jiu-jitsu? Oh, you know, listen to Joe Rogan and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, but then even, yeah, the current guys who are massive on, like, you know, who has contributed the most in terms of like evolving the sport from a technical level and like competing.
Probably Danaher.
Yeah, Danaher, Gordon Ryan, like Craig Jones, like these guys are pushing the envelope in terms of what athletes are capable of, you know. Yeah. So arguments for all these people are valid, but yeah, it's like, well, what metric are you using? Or who's contributed more people to attend a free trial class? Okay, cool, Joe Rogan. But then to say, but Joe's only, you know, because of Dana, I'm like, man, like, yeah, you're stretching it a bit. But I get the point.
So if you can agree with the fact that Joe Rogan wouldn't be as popular as he is without the UFC / Dana White, then JT's point is very strong. But I disagree with that, the fundamental argument. But what I'm so shocked at is how well he crafted and set the stage. Obviously, cut straight to the chase. So listen to the way he argues for it and establishes the argument. Very well thought out. Very JT-esque. He can be very, very fucking bright. And I was shocked. I was like, well, that, you know, you nearly convinced me. But I disagree with fundamentally that Joe Rogan is popular because of the UFC. It helps, but it's definitely not why he became the superstar that he is.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't listen to the episode. I don't know a lot about Dana White's history other than he used to be in the boxing industry prior to UFC. I don't know a lot about Joe Rogan's history other than he was a comedian and on Fear Factor. But I mean, he had some level of fame prior to the UFC. So like, it's hard to then just credit all of the most influential person in the history of jiu-jitsu is Dana White.
Who has done more to grow the sport is because of the influence on Joe Rogan and because he built the UFC as well. Let's not forget that. So many people come into jiu-jitsu because of the UFC. But I mean, like I said as well, like, it's all great.
Build it all you want, Dana White. But if Hoist Gracie never turned up, like, did you still grow jiu-jitsu? Like, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces, I guess, and no one does anything truly alone to some degree.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, interesting topic, and I think would be a fun conversation, but not one that there's a definite clear, unless you have a very tangible metric to measure the question.
We could get a survey of every person that trains jiu-jitsu right now, and they have to indicate the reason why they started, and then we'll tally them and see who, as individuals, have the most people training jiu-jitsu right now is like attributed to them.
Yeah, and if that was the metric, it would be Joe Rogan for sure.
I started jiu-jitsu because my mate Zach started listening to Joe Rogan. He's like, oh, fuck, check out Joe Rogan. I hadn't listened to the podcast in fucking years. I started listening to it again. And then we both were like, yeah, we're going to do jiu-jitsu because of Joe Rogan.
So that reminds me of another little today I learned that I saw pop up. That again, I didn't, like a lot of people, I didn't read an article or look into it. I just like read the headline and was like, had a chuckle and moved on. But it was something that along the lines of women find, like, when they are looking for a partner, if they learn that the partner listens to the Joe Rogan podcast, they find that a less desirable quality. And that's all I read. So I didn't look into it, but I just had a
bullshit, bro.
Yeah, it probably is.
That's fucking propaganda. Not even validated.
All
Fake
I'm talking,
news.
all
Fake
I'm
news.
doing is
Take it down.
regurgitating a headline I read.
Yeah, classic. Did you read it on CNN? Fuck you.
Yeah, all I did was have a chuckle and move on. You know, this is no different to people who train jiu-jitsu who have small dicks or something. I'd have a chuckle and move on. You know,
it's like true.
How'd they know? Fuck. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that is it for us today, this week, this episode. Stoked to have Kieren back competing and looking forward to, well, I'm sure you guys will hear about it in 4 weeks, the upcoming competition. As always, if you have any questions, please send them through. You know where everything is. The links are in bio. Links are on our Instagram. We're very accessible people. Also, long outro here, but Kieren, I'm sure you've seen that our brief little conversation we had last week in our episode, that's what all our comments are on YouTube.
Yep.
You know, so
I sure have.
Yeah. So some
people got really mad about it.
I don't know if they got mad. People just took
one
the time
guy was
to.
super aggressive.
Oh,
one guy was like, "Fucking yeah." I nearly replied, but like, fuck it.
Anyway, but yes, thank you again, guys, so much for listening.
Subscribe.
Yeah, what is it? Like, follow, subscribe, click buttons. Yep. Guys, thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See ya.